Power promises glory, yet few understand its hidden curse. The higher you climb, the fewer stand beside you. Tonight, we expose the brutal truth of why every apex, be it throne, empire, or legacy, is ruled in solitude. If you seek power, you must learn why isolation is not a weakness, but the price of supremacy. The world admires the peak, but forgets what it takes to stand there. The apex is not crowded, it is barren, windswept, and cruel. At the summit of power you will find no allies, only shadows. Trust decays, loyalty fractures, and companionship becomes a mask for betrayal. This is not tragedy, it is necessity. For those who seek dominion must accept that greatness is measured not by those who surround you, but by your ability to endure the silence of the throne. In this lesson, we unmask the psychology of solitude and reveal why the apex cannot, and will never, be shared. Power always seduces with the illusion of closeness. The ruler thinks he can keep friends beside him, confidence at his table, advisors whispering loyalty into his ear. But history tells a different story. Every throne, every empire, every so-called dynasty collapses not because of enemies from without, but because of closeness from within. Why? Because proximity corrupts. Those nearest to you are the ones who study you most carefully. They see your weaknesses, your hesitations, your fears. And once they know them, they can exploit them. Consider Caesar. He was not slain by an army of strangers, but by men he trusted, men who dined with him, who called themselves his friends. The knife is always held by a familiar hand. The public enemy attacks your walls, the trusted companion pierces your heart. This is why the apex demands detachment. The higher you rise, the colder you must become. You cannot afford the luxury of intimacy, because intimacy reveals too much. And power is not sustained by what others know of you, but by what they can never know. Think of Alexander, conquering lands beyond measure. Yet his greatest threat was not Persia, not India. It was his own generals, each nursing ambitions of their own. He divided them, set rivalries between them, ensured no one man grew too close to his power. For if a general felt indispensable, Alexander would soon feel vulnerable. Detachment was not cruelty, it was survival. Ask yourself this: who in your life knows you too well? Who has seen your weaknesses, your private doubts, your moments of hesitation? Those are the very people who hold invisible daggers. They may not strike today, but they wait, and waiting is the true patience of ambition. Psychology reveals a simple truth: familiarity breeds contempt. The more people see of you, the less they revere you, the less they fear you. A leader who is too accessible ceases to be a leader. He becomes ordinary, and the ordinary can always be replaced. Distance, however, creates mystique. It builds an aura that ordinary men cannot touch. This is why kings once sat upon elevated thrones, why emperors concealed themselves behind layers of ceremony. Not because they needed luxury, but because they needed distance. The bodyguard at the gate is not only for protection, it is for perception. It tells the world, you cannot touch me. Detachment is not the absence of connection. It is the control of connection. The wise ruler gives his followers just enough to remain loyal, but never enough to feel equal. He shows warmth when it benefits him, and coldness when it protects him. This balance preserves power far longer than sentiment ever could. Think also of modern leaders. Corporations, nations, empires, they all mirror the same principle. The CEO who mingles too freely with employees soon finds respect dwindling. The president who shares too much of his private life becomes a figure of gossip, not authority. Power decays when it is touched too often. Detachment restores its strength. But you may ask, is this not loneliness? Yes. And yet, loneliness is the cost of supremacy. Better to stand alone at the peak than surrounded in the valley. Companionship feels comforting, but comfort is a slow poison to ambition. Detachment, though cold, is the armor that keeps betrayal from reaching your skin. When you distance yourself, people project their own fears and fantasies onto you. They imagine you greater than you are. They respect what they cannot fully know, and in that space of mystery, power thrives. Detachment, then, is not simply emotional discipline. It is strategy. It is the careful construction of distance so that others depend on you, but you never depend on them. It is the art of being present enough to command, yet absent enough to be untouchable. So, I ask you, do you still crave intimacy when it erodes authority? Do you still cling to closeness when it invites betrayal? If you wish to rise, learn to withdraw. Not completely, but deliberately, because every step toward attachment is a step away from the apex. Remember, this power does not crumble under the weight of external enemies. It rots from the inside through the cracks of misplaced trust. The apex demands detachment, for only in distance can authority survive, and this is just the beginning. For if detachment is the shield, what then is the weapon? That we will uncover next. Every rise to power begins with allies. You cannot climb without them. You need those who lend their strength, their influence, their loyalty, at least in the beginning. But understand this, the very hands that pull you upward will one day itch to drag you down. Why? Because proximity breeds ambition. Those who stand closest to your throne begin to imagine themselves sitting upon it. And in their minds, the difference between serving you and becoming you becomes dangerously thin. Consider the fate of Richard III. His throne was not threatened by peasants or distant enemies, but by those within his own ranks. Lords who once swore loyalty, yet who saw opportunity in his crown. Allies do not remain allies. They evolve, and their evolution is almost always toward rivalry. Even in the Empire of Rome, alliances were fragile masks. Pompey and Caesar once stood side by side, each benefiting from the other's power. But power shared is never stable. Soon, Caesar outshone Pompey, and Pompey plotted to diminish him. The alliance crumbled, and Rome descended into civil war. This pattern is eternal. Allies transform into adversaries the moment your success eclipses their ambition. Ask yourself this: would you forever serve another man's power? Would you accept your life as the shadow of someone else's glory? No, neither would those around you. And so, no ally remains harmless once you ascend. Psychology explains this with brutal clarity. Status envy. When you rise, you remind others of their stagnation. When you command, you remind them of their submission. The human mind cannot endure this imbalance indefinitely. So loyalty erodes, and rivalry takes its place. Napoleon understood this. He surrounded himself with marshals, brilliant men of war. Yet he never allowed any one of them to hold too much power. When one became too popular, too celebrated, Napoleon shifted his favor, elevating another to balance the scales. This was not kindness, it was containment. By dividing his allies, he ensured they could never unite against him. Now look closer at your own life. Who celebrates your victories, but secretly counts the cost to themselves? Who applauds you, yet watches with quiet resentment as your influence grows? It is often those nearest to you, colleagues, friends, even family. They smile in public, but inside, they measure the distance between your height and their own. And that distance gnaws at them like a wound. The irony is cruel. You cannot rise without allies, yet you cannot remain secure with them. The very ladder that lifts you becomes the weapon poised to strike you, so the wise ruler plays a delicate game. He uses allies, but never lets them forget who leads. He rewards them, but ensures they depend more on him than he depends on them. And when an ally grows too strong, too ambitious, he must be cut down, quietly and decisively, before rivalry ripens into rebellion. You may think this is harsh, but look at history. The Borgias in Italy were masters of this principle. They welcomed allies only long enough to serve their purpose, then discarded them when their ambition became dangerous. Cruel? Yes. Effective? Always. Modern psychology calls this the paradox of cooperation. Two people may work together, but as soon as resources, recognition, or power are unequally distributed, the weaker partner feels resentment. The ally begins plotting, consciously or unconsciously, to rebalance the scale, and rebalancing often means your downfall. So I ask you, are your allies truly loyal, or are they simply waiting for the moment to claim your crown? Do they serve you out of devotion or out of necessity? The distinction matters, because necessity fades once opportunity appears. Allies are useful, but they are never permanent. They are stepping stones, not foundations. And when the stepping stone decides it deserves to be the throne itself, you must act. Delay is fatal. Mercy is weakness. For once an ally imagines himself your rival, he is already halfway there. This is the cruel truth of power. You cannot share it. To share is to invite envy, and envy is the seed of betrayal. Allies help you rise, but they will also dream of your fall. And so the question becomes, how do you keep them close enough to use, yet far enough to control? That is the next secret of the solitary apex. Power does not thrive in the crowd. It suffocates there. It drowns in familiarity, in gossip, in the endless noise of voices demanding to be heard. True power, lasting power, requires separation. Not because isolation is comfortable, but because isolation is necessary. Look to the great rulers of history. They understood that to govern effectively, one must stand apart. Kings and emperors built rituals, distance, ceremony, not out of vanity, but out of strategy. The crown was not worn for decoration. It was a shield of perception, a barrier that separated ruler from ruled. And in that distance lay their authority. Why is this distance essential? Because people respect what they cannot touch. They revere what they cannot fully understand. When you are too close, you become ordinary. When you are too visible, you invite contempt. Isolation transforms you from a man into a symbol. Think of the pharaohs of Egypt. They were not merely kings. They were gods walking among mortals. Could they have maintained such divinity if they mingled freely in the markets? Of course not. Their isolation created mystique, and mystique created control. Now ask yourself, in your own life, how often have you made yourself too available? How often have you allowed others to believe they know you, fully and completely? Each time you do, you surrender a piece of your authority. Familiarity erodes respect. And once respect is gone, control soon follows. Isolation is not the absence of power, it is its amplifier. The wise leader does not vanish entirely. He appears selectively, strategically, like a rare event. And because his presence is scarce, it is treasured, feared, and never taken for granted. Consider modern examples. A CEO who hides behind closed doors is not seen as weak, he is seen as commanding. His absence makes every appearance an event, every word a decree. Contrast this with the leader who mingles too freely. He becomes approachable, yes, but also replaceable. The aura of command evaporates in casual familiarity. Even in psychology, this principle is clear. Scarcity creates value. What is rare is revered. When people cannot access you at will, they imagine your worth to be greater than it is. Isolation is therefore not withdrawal. It is a weapon of perception. Think also of generals in war. The commander who laughs and dines with his soldiers may win affection, but he risks losing discipline. The one who stands apart commands obedience, for his distance reminds all that he is not their equal, but their master. Would you rather be loved as a friend, or feared as a ruler? The choice determines whether your power endures. Of course, isolation carries risks. Too much distance, and you appear detached, even irrelevant. The art is balance. To appear close enough to inspire loyalty, but distant enough to command awe. To speak rarely, so that when you do, every word echoes with weight. To reveal little, so that what is hidden grows larger in the imagination of others. History's greatest manipulators mastered this balance. Take Louis XIV, the Sun King of France. He orchestrated elaborate rituals around his daily life. Who could hand him his gloves, who could approach his table. It was not indulgence. It was control. His courtiers fought desperately for the smallest fragments of his attention. By isolating himself, Louis ensured that access to him was more valuable than gold. And by controlling access, he controlled them. So I ask you again, how visible are you? How accessible? Do people treat your time, your presence, your attention as sacred? Or do they waste it casually? If they waste it, the fault lies not with them, but with you. For you have failed to create the distance that commands respect. Isolation is strategy because it shifts the balance of dependence. They need you. You do not need them. They wait for your attention. You do not beg for theirs, and in this asymmetry lies the essence of dominance. Never mistake isolation for weakness. It is not retreat, it is not exile. It is calculated scarcity, the most refined form of control. For when you master distance, you master perception. And when you master perception, you master power itself. But remember, distance protects only if you wield it with precision. The next step is to understand what corrodes it most quickly. It is not gossip. It is not rebellion. It is something far more dangerous. It is trust. Trust. It is the sweetest poison ever offered to those who seek power. It feels warm, safe, even necessary. But the moment you drink from it, you hand another man the blade with which he will one day strike you. History proves this again and again. Caesar trusted Brutus. Edward Ty trusted his favorites. The Tsar trusted Rasputin. And each trust became the crack through which ruin entered. No empire, no throne, no crown has ever been destroyed by suspicion. They fall by trust. Why is trust so dangerous? Because it creates blindness. When you trust someone, you stop watching them. You stop calculating their motives. You stop asking the most essential question, what do they want from me? And the moment you stop asking, you lose control. Consider the Borgia family. Their genius lay not in alliances, not in armies, but in their refusal to trust. They understood that every smile hides a hunger, every vow of loyalty conceals ambition. By assuming betrayal in advance, they stayed alive where others perished. Ask yourself, who do you trust most? Who could enter your life today, whisper something into your ear, and make you believe it without doubt? That person, right now, is your greatest danger, not because they hate you, but because they know how to bypass your defenses. Enemies strike your armor. The trusted one steps inside it. Psychology confirms this harsh truth. The human mind craves certainty. We want to believe that some bonds are unbreakable. We cling to the illusion that loyalty is eternal. But power alters every relationship. The same man who once followed you will, under the weight of envy or ambition, begin to question why he serves at all. And because you trust him, you will not see the shift until it is too late. Think of Stalin. He trusted almost no one, and yet even he, in fleeting moments, allowed trust to blind him. His greatest purges came not from enemies, but from former allies who had once been indispensable. When you trust, you grant another the space to grow powerful enough to betray you. Now, you may protest, can a leader survive without trust? Yes, not by living in paranoia, but by replacing trust with control. Instead of trusting loyalty, build dependence. Instead of trusting promises, build surveillance. Instead of trusting affection, build fear. Fear does not betray. Dependence does not waver. Trust always does. Think carefully, would you rather sleep peacefully knowing you trust your allies, or sleep watchfully knowing you control them? Only one of these paths leaves you alive at the apex. Even in modern life, this principle holds. How many businesses crumble because the founder trusted a partner too deeply? How many politicians fall because they trusted their closest advisors only to be exposed in scandal? In every collapse, trust is the silent assassin. The irony is brutal. The more power you gain, the more people you must trust to maintain it, yet the more dangerous trust becomes. This paradox destroys the unwise. The skilled ruler solves it by never giving absolute trust. He gives pieces, fragments, but never the whole. No one man holds the full key to his downfall. Divide responsibilities, divide secrets, divide favors. When no single person feels irreplaceable, betrayal becomes far more difficult. Remember this principle: trust makes you predictable, and the predictable can always be destroyed. When others know how much you rely on them, they know exactly how to wound you. When no one can be sure of your dependence, you remain untouchable. So I ask you, where in your life are you leaning too heavily on trust? Where are you blind because you choose to be blind? That blindness is the seed of ruin, and the seed always grows. Trust is not a gift. It is a vulnerability. A wise ruler never gives it freely. He simulates trust. He acts as though he believes. But deep inside he watches, calculates, and prepares. For the moment you trust completely is the moment you lose control. Remember this, above all. Enemies sharpen their knives in secret. Friends sharpen theirs at your table. And if trust is the weakness, then what remains? How does one endure the solitude of command without succumbing to despair? The answer lies in the silence of supremacy. At the summit of power, you will notice something unexpected. Silence. The cheering fades, the noise of allies disappears, the constant chatter of advisors dissolves into whispers. And in this silence, many rulers collapse. But the strongest transform it into their greatest weapon. Do you imagine the apex is filled with celebration? It is not. It is filled with emptiness. The laughter of companions vanishes, replaced by the echo of your own thoughts. For at the top, no one dares to speak truth to you. No one dares to challenge you. And so, silence surrounds you like a cloak. Most men fear this silence. They rush to fill it, with flatterers, with noise, with endless distractions. But in doing so, they weaken themselves. For every voice they invite into their solitude becomes a chain around their power. Consider the emperors of Rome. Those who feared silence surrounded themselves with sycophants, men who echoed their every word. Yet these emperors became blind, unable to distinguish reality from lies. Caligula drowned in this false harmony. Nero, too. Their need to escape silence destroyed them. But then consider Marcus Aurelius. The philosopher, king embraced silence. He turned inward, using solitude to sharpen his mind, to harden his resolve. While others drowned in the noise of court, he found clarity in withdrawal. The silence did not consume him, it strengthened him. Ask yourself this when you are alone: what do you hear? Do you hear panic, anxiety, fear? Or do you hear strategy, vision, control? Your answer reveals whether you are prepared for supremacy or destined to crumble beneath it. Psychology teaches us that silence magnifies the mind. It can reveal your strength or expose your weakness. For weak men, silence is unbearable. It reminds them of their fragility, their doubts, their insecurities. But for the powerful, silence becomes fertile ground. In it, they cultivate foresight, patience, and absolute focus. Think of Napoleon on Elba. Exiled, isolated, stripped of the empire he once commanded. Yet in the silence of exile, he plotted. He listened to no court, no flatterers, no voices but his own. And when he returned, he shook Europe once more. Silence, properly wielded, is not defeat, it is preparation. Now, reflect on your own life. When was the last time you embraced silence deliberately? Not the silence of failure, not the silence of abandonment, but the chosen silence of command. Do you run from it, filling your hours with noise, with endless company, with distraction? If so, you are no ruler, you are a slave to noise. Supremacy requires you to endure what others cannot, and silence is the purest test. Because in silence, you face yourself, your ambitions, your fears, your limits. And only by mastering yourself can you master others. This is why the solitary apex is so dangerous. The silence strips away illusions. It exposes truths that noise conceals. The crowd tells you are great. Silence asks, are you truly? And only those who can answer without fear deserve to rule. Notice also how silence creates power in the eyes of others. The man who speaks constantly is never feared. His words become common, his presence ordinary. But the man who waits, who listens, who holds his tongue until the precise moment, his words strike like a blade. Silence sharpens speech. It gives weight to presence. It transforms the ordinary into the absolute. This is why wise rulers do not rush to respond. They allow silence to work for them. In negotiations, in conflicts, in command, he who can hold silence longest holds power. Because silence makes others uneasy. They reveal themselves. They speak too much. They surrender secrets in their desperation to fill the void. So I ask you, can you wield silence as a weapon? Can you sit alone at the apex, hearing nothing but your own mind, and remain unshaken? If you cannot, power will consume you. If you can, silence will crown you. Remember this: supremacy is not loud. It is not noisy. It is not desperate for attention. Supremacy is silent, and its silence commands more than armies ever could. But here lies the final question. If silence sustains supremacy, what then sustains the solitary ruler against the inevitable passage of time? For even silence cannot stop the decay of power. What truly endures? Power is never about what people see. It is about what they do not see. The most effective ruler controls not through force, but through invisibility. Influence disguised as choice. Command disguised as freedom. When people believe they act by their own will, yet unknowingly follow yours. That is mastery. That is control refined to its purest form. Ask yourself, would you rather rule openly, inviting resistance, or rule silently, shaping lives without opposition? The crowd resists change it can see, but it never resists the ones hidden in the mind. This is the essence of power. Not noise, not threats, but subtlety, a hand unseen guiding destinies. Now, I turn to you. Comment your thoughts below. What struck you most in this lesson? Subscribe if you are ready to learn strategies others fear to speak aloud. And share this with those who still believe power is loud, obvious, and noble. Because the truth is darker, and only those who embrace it rise.